You're listening to NYCC Me, a podcast on all things diversity and inclusion. Every episode, we speak openly and honestly with colleagues and guests, sharing knowledge, personal stories, struggles and successes. If you want to know more about NYCC's diversity and inclusion journey and what it means for you, then stay tuned. Welcome to the third episode of NYCC Me. It's really great to be joined by Justine Brooksbank, who is the Assistant Chief Executive of Business Support. And today we're joined actually to discuss International Women's Day, which is coming up in March, and International Women's History Month. So I'm really grateful to have Justine on the call, and I hope that this is a really interesting meeting for you all, podcast for you all to listen into. Justine, thank you for joining.
That's all right. Very, very pleased to come and talk about a topic that's very important to me.
That's good. And actually, on that note, do you remember kind of a time where Women's History Month or International Women's Day has been celebrated and kind of what that has meant for you, or do you feel like it's kind of a newer?
I think it is quite new. I mean, I confess I wasn't aware of International Women's Day, and I've had some contact from some female colleagues, particularly those that there was a couple of colleagues that come from they've worked in other countries where it was a lot bigger, so I wasn't really aware of it. But when you think about it, it's a good opportunity to kind of reflect on gender equality progress. Certainly history, a women's history point, and the opportunity to think about history is good, because gender equality and the women's movement, there is a very rich history there, but also the adage that history is usually written by the victors, the winners. There is a lot of history of women that has been written out, or women in history that were important that have been marginalised or ignored. So actually, if it's an opportunity to reflect on some of that, history is important because it gives us an opportunity to reflect on the road travelled, where we are and why. And so I think in terms of gender equality, it's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's actually a really important point, actually. And I think as well, when we're thinking about, I guess, contemporary times, that constant reflection on history kind of really shows us kind of where we actually are at now and where we have to go in the future. And I guess on that note, and on a more personal note, I wanted to ask you, in terms of your position as quite a senior person within the council and as a woman, reflecting on your kind of career and your experiences starting off and the various roles that you've had and then coming to the council, were there moments where you felt like how a lot of women, including myself, feel sometimes, that sense of imposter syndrome, or, the struggles of being the only woman maybe in a quite a male dominated space?
Yes, I mean, I think there inevitably were, and imposter syndrome, I don't think it just affects women, does it? But I think it more affects women than men, particularly at work. So there were points, certainly at an early stage of my career, I worked in a very male-dominated environment for a big American design and construction company that designed and built oil refineries and chemical plants. And literally on any one plant of hundreds and hundreds of people, there would be me. And in terms of other women, there might be, if I was lucky, a single female engineer. And there would always be a number of secretaries who were other women, but that was it. So it was very male dominated, and there were lots of particular issues about working in that environment that made it difficult if you were a young woman. And I could bore you with my war stories for a long time, but I won't. And basically it was blatant sex discrimination that on my reflection about what's improved and what's changed, I don't honestly think you would come across today. A small example was the officers on the site always had those calendars in them, those girly calendars and copies of, page 3 of the Sun. I just don't think you'd find those in working environments now. and I did do my stressy strop and got rid of them all, to find that they reappeared in my office. Wow. So and you know, they might sound like small things, but actually they're quite important when you're trying to be taken seriously, and you have things like that happening all the time. So that was me starting out, I think. And then I worked in the police for a while. I worked for a large hospital trust, and to some extent imposter syndrome there. I think it is that for women, it's much more, we tend to focus, and I'm generalizing here, actually there's been some research on this, on how women and men approach job descriptions for a promotional post differently. And in general, women will highlight the areas that they think then that they perhaps don't have the experience and skills for, and then decide not to apply. Whereas in general, men will focus on the areas that they can do and think, well, the rest will be all right, and then apply. So I think it's probably women are more likely to suffer from a kind of lack of confidence, and that feeling of, actually, is this really working? Am I doing okay? Rather than just assuming you are and getting on with it. And for me, I particularly used to have that when I swapped jobs, when I would go for another job at a senior level on my career path. And when I got the other job, I would worry that whilst I've been successful in the one I was leaving, that might just be a unique set of circumstances in that particular job, and I wouldn't be any good if I went somewhere else. And it was always a bit of a surprise to me that actually it was fine after a few months when I got there. And I think in the end I did that a few times, and I suppose I just got bored of worrying about it and thought, well, do you know what, I can't be, it can't just be that I've got lucky, or I'm kind of very good at blagging it, or I must actually be doing it. And it wasn't a eureka moment. I think it just dawned on me, or I just stopped worrying about it and needing that kind of validation or approval and recognition that I was doing all right. I developed a bit of self-confidence and self-belief that actually I was fine. But I also think imposter syndrome, you know, it can come from lots of different reasons. It can be your social background, you know, it can be. So I don't think it's just a gender issue. I do think there is something particular about women that make them more susceptible to that in terms of in the workplace. Yeah,
no, that's very interesting. And I think for myself, I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but I can imagine for a lot of people, they feel, you know, that they've experienced quite similar, almost exactly similar things to what you mentioned in regards to that kind of questioning yourself and feeling like, oh, you know, perhaps I just fluked that, and you know, they happened to just like me more, and it wasn't that I was any good at it, or you know, they just said that to keep me happy, but they didn't really mean it. And all those kind of inner mechanisms that happen in your head that make you question everything you do. And it's, you know, there's a lot of confidence building and training and stuff like that, but it's also quite reassuring to know that at some point, you know, you just have to start believing in yourself in a sense, and you know, do what you can, and stop kind of seeking necessarily the validation of others. If you've worked hard and if you've put your all in, you know, that's essentially the most important thing is. And but I think, yeah, I agree with you as well in terms of, you know, how that experience might overlap with various different factors or parts of your identity, and then magnify and you know, and create the kind of experiences that you have in the workplace. It was quite shocking to hear when you were saying about the, you know, magazines and Ep.3, and especially that after you said, you know, this is not right, this is not something that makes me as a woman in the workplace feel comfortable, it shouldn't be within a professional environment, that people actually went back into your office and intentionally put them there.
They didn't just put them there, they covered my entire office, floor, ceiling, desk, etc. with them, and thought it was all very amusing. But
yeah,
they, you know, there's, to some extent, things like I said, that you wouldn't find that now, and I look back and wonder why I didn't, but I'd already written a formal letter about it. I'd already made the point. I actually personally went and removed them all and put them in a bin bag and drove out of the site and put them in, in a big dustbin, and then went then feeling much better about things, went went to the canteen for lunch. I went back to my office to find that actually. There they were. Well, not the same ones, but yeah. So I decided my mistake that I was giving them a warning that that's what I was going to do. But looking back, that was outrageous, really, and a lot of other stuff was outrageous. But it was kind of just accepted that was, everybody, you would get called love, you would be patronised, and and it was just accepted that was the way it was. And I just don't. I think the world is a different place now. I hope it is, and I hope no one puts up with that or feels the need for that to be seen as normal anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I would hope so too. And kind of on that point of the way things have changed over the years, what do you think? I mean, do you feel like there are some key elements in terms of the way women are treated, or certain experiences women might have in the workplace that are things that are still needing that kind of progress?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think there's a lot of things that have hugely improved, haven't they? And I mean, I'm going to talk about flexible working because, my eldest child's 26 now. So, it was a long time since I juggled small children and work. But I still remember it feeling, and I'm sure it does now. And it's not just, it's not just having children, it's having any caring responsibilities. You feel like you are failing on both counts, that you are trying to do mission impossible and you're doing a bad job in your caring responsibilities with children or caring for a relative, and you're not doing very well at work because actually you can't be focused wholly on either, and you're constantly juggling and compromising, and it's a real struggle. So I think that flexible working, the way flexible working exists now is a lot better. When I had my eldest child, you had 12 weeks maternity leave, that was kind of it. And whilst in theory you could request part-time hours, it wasn't really going to work out well. So I do think that's improved, but I also think that it's a bit of a double-edged sword, really, because what it does is it enables usually women to essentially do everything or try to do everything or think they can do everything, because if your employer's been flexible and it's well, you can work part-time or you can do school hours or whereas actually what we need that flexible arrangement for everybody. And we need it not just to be expected that women will have the caring role outside work, and that men will do that as well, and that flexibility. I don't think flexible working is just about gender. I think it's really an issue about being inclusive, because people might want to work flexibly because of their religious beliefs and how they want to practice their religion. They might want to work flexibly because they've got they've got other responsibilities. Something in life might have changed. They might have suddenly been bereaved or got divorced, and just everything shifted, and they need to be able to work flexibly for a while to put things back together in a different order. You might get someone who's got a really important hobby to them, or they might be semi-professional. We've had kind of people who participated in the Olympics. So I think it's about inclusion, but it inevitably, because of the expectation of society that women will do the caring role, it ends up being about flexible working for women, and you end up in that grind where you're just trying to do everything. Having young children and working with a revelation to me for all the wrong reasons, really. I missed work terribly. I missed the stimulation of work. I missed colleagues. I was stuck at home. I've been kind of not really had any time off before giving birth. Suddenly with this new baby, and I think my neighbours probably saved me. but it and then realizing that you just have to juggle everything, and it's really difficult. I remember one of my neighbours saying, as I was going off to work with my child in the car to drop off at nursery on the way, saying, oh, that's, look at you, I don't know how you do it, but you've got you've got your job and you've got your career and you've got children, you're having it all. And I said, I'm not having it all, I'm doing it all. Yeah. Because that's so I think the flexible working arrangements have improved hugely, rightly so, and they do really help, but they are a bit of a double-edged sword. And I think there will be real progress on gender equality when actually flexible working arrangement isn't about being flexible for women. It's just about being flexible, and it's actually more about having a very inclusive workforce where people have other things outside work that they need flexibility for. Yeah, so that's a bit of a pet point of mine, so I've probably gone on a bit.
No, not at all. I think that's actually, it's a really good point about how developing an inclusive workplace is beneficial for everyone, and also beneficial for the workplace, in that when you allow people to kind of have their enriched lives that are beyond work, they bring that enrichment back into their work too. And I think especially the point about it being somewhat a double-edged sword, and that double burden in a sense of feeling like you have to give all of yourself to everything, that I imagine for a lot of women today, that's a big difficulty that they face it, and I imagine there's a lot of different feelings around that too. So I think it's a really excellent kind of point to talk about. And I guess kind of thinking about what we ourselves can do to, I guess, address maybe certain issues, further the aim of gender equality, and also kind of what you mentioned before about wishing you'd kind of said something more or done something more, but then not really feeling like or trying to kind of navigate a situation after it happened, and all those kind of questions that come into that. To get to the point, do you have any kind of, I guess, asks for the audience in terms of what they can do within their own personal lives and work lives?
I suppose it is that point about, call it out, really. And that's easier said than done. And I do it now. I call out language, and, people refer to female colleagues as girls. There will be some colleagues listen to this who have been called out on it, or ladies, or there's certain words that have connotations that I will call people out on, and we could talk about that later. But so I think call it out. I know that's easier said than done. It's easy for me to do it now. I didn't find it very easy when I was junior and I was young, and that wasn't easy at all, and I didn't do it. I wish I had, but whether it would have made a difference, I don't know. So I think there's that. I think we've got networks going for some groups. I think we can use those, and I think people should be vocal and not worried about coming forward in terms of suggestions for improvement. I think as an employer, we and to colleagues, we need to promote our flexible working arrangements to be available for men and as well. And I think, it's interesting. I'd be interested in the views of male colleagues as to how comfortable they feel asking for flexible working arrangements. So talking to one of my team recently who's at home and working, as we all are, and her children's nursery had a case of COVID, so suddenly her and her husband had 2 small children at home, and they both were working full time and trying to do the work. And she commented that they had a discussion that his work had, they hadn't even thought about that. Whilst they knew that he'd got 2 children at home and not in nursery, they hadn't even thought about making any allowance or accommodation for that. They just assumed he would just carry on as it is, presumably because they just assumed that his wife would be looking after the children. Whereas you know, we were inevitably, as a line manager, I was inevitably going, well, just do what you can, don't worry about it, you know, it's going to be difficult, but you know, we'll manage it. So I also wonder if, you know, if our male colleagues don't feel able to ask for, you know, to leave early, to go and do the school run, or to start late because they've done the school run, or to work school hours, or to work part-time, or to have a long period of paternity leave rather than a week or two. So that would be my ask of any male colleagues out there, you know, please ask away if that's what you want to do. I was reflecting on something in the press last week, which was that a third of FTSE 350 directors are now women, and that was heralded in the press as huge progress, because it used to be, it was 22% in 2015, so in the space of 6 years it's improved, and now it's the third. And I was thinking, well, surely it should be a half, and why are we heralding a third as huge progress? And then you get to think in terms of about careers and progression at work. Well, why isn't it a half? There isn't anything innately, women don't have anything innate that stop them having leadership roles or senior management roles. There's nothing biological, or, you know, it's nothing DNA. So why at this point in time are they not, you know, 50%? It seems odd. And I think you do need to start, and then you do, when you think about it, you do start unwrapping some of that about expectations of you know, women having other you know, other roles outside work, and the difficulty of combining that, the sheer grind of, if you've got children or caring responsibilities, trying to do it all. There was an interesting interview with the CEO of Confused.com, who is female and has 2 small children, and she actually turned it on its head and said, actually, working mums are really, really good in the workplace because they're very efficient and very effective, because they can't waste a minute. They just have to be completely on it and you know, be really effective, make decisions really quickly, because actually they've got to go and do something else. And so I think it can be turned on its head. But I do, when you think about that third and that being heralded, 30% being heralded as wonderful progress, you just think, really? And why is that? And I think some of that, why that is the point we were talking about earlier about, you know, women's confidence about taking the next step, about going for a promotion, and then those factors I've mentioned about, well, if you've got children, that's all very difficult, and etc. So it's a bit, I came to the conclusion, unsurprisingly, it's complicated and it's multifaceted, but it's not because women can't somehow do those senior positions, because they inevitably can.
No, that's an excellent point, and especially in regards to, you know, just because something is complicated and complex doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve, you know, that time to really delve deeper. It doesn't mean that, you know, it can just be, you know, because there seems to be sometimes a tendency to be like the willingness to just explain something away on a surface level, because having to dig a bit deeper means, you know, requiring, you know, a lot of work, to be honest, like to kind of sift through and really figure out where the issues are. But without that, there won't be impact. And I guess that's, you know, the brilliant thing about International Women's Day and Women's History Month is it's that constant, I guess, annual reminder of what's been done and what work needs to be done. And that hopefully will help progress to continue, because it's very easy, like, for progress to stall and then potentially go back as well. And it's, you know, I guess on a final note, is there, you know, any one thing, I guess you might have already mentioned it, but any kind of one key message or key thing that we've discussed today that you would really want people to keep in mind?
I think, as I've touched on this, and it's only a little, it might seem a minor thing, I don't know. Little things are important, aren't they? But at use of language, I do have a bit of an issue about use of language. So I've mentioned referring to female colleagues as ladies and girls. I think that's kind of patronising. It's a bit demeaning. I know people don't intend it to come out like that, but I think it does. So I'd ask people to reflect. I think we should all reflect on our use of language, actually, at work and elsewhere. Some of the ones I have an issue with is, and I do think there's ways of describing certain characteristics and qualities that you need at work, particularly for senior posts. Well, actually, not just for senior posts. So I have a big thing about the word gravitas, because when somebody says, oh, we want to appoint someone who's got gravitas or presence, I think they want a man in that job, because that's what that means to me, gravitas. And that's a word that's been used throughout my career about, we need something gravitas. And I have no idea whether I have gravitas. And I used to think, well, where'd you get this gravitas? Can I go and buy it from somewhere? Is it like, how do you get it? So I think what's meant is credibility, and you kind of earn credibility, don't you? Work hard, you get things right, and you earn credibility. So, but equally, when we talk about, you'll see adverts where we need a strong leader, and I think that sounds very male. And equally, you will see adverts for jobs that say we need somebody with a caring and compassionate nature, and I think that probably means that they think that that's a female job. So I think particularly in recruitment, but also in language at work, we just need to think about that and be a bit more considered in our use of language. And I know, that might be a bit controversial, and some people probably won't agree with me on that. I'm going to give an example from where I worked previous. So I spent a number of years working in a big hospital trust. And when I got there, I hadn't worked at a big hospital trust before, and I was the lead HR person for surgery. So I wanted to make sure that I got it right, and there's a certain etiquette. So in terms of addressing people, and you don't, surgeons who are consultant level are called Mr. So I thought, okay, so not doctor, Mr. So I said, okay, but what do you call a female surgeon? And the response I got, well, we only have one, and she's called Shivanti, which was her first name. And I thought, and I still think, because I think that's still the position, what must it be like to aspire to and be in a job where the very title of it assumes you can't be in it? So language is important, and how we refer to each other at work is important, and that might seem like a small point to end on, but again, it's a kind of it's as is obvious, a pet thing of mine.
And that's the thing, I feel like that's actually a really big point, and it almost brings us, to be honest, full circle in terms of language can impact our feeling of our confidence and our belief that we're able and welcome to be in a particular role. So I think it's a very good way to bring it fully back. And I just want to thank you actually, Justine, because this has been a really really interesting and engaging conversation, and brought up a range of different issues and topics, and yeah, thank you so much, and I really hope
Thank you very much.
I really hope that people enjoy watching this, and please do engage any questions that you have, or thoughts and feelings. Engage as much as you want. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for listening, anyone. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of NYCC Me. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to keep up to date with any new episodes or be part of the D&I conversation more widely, please do join the NYCC Me podcast Yammer page. Hopefully see you next time.